to
So the,
wait.
Okay, the time is now 12:35. I call to order the Orange County Sewer District Number One Advisory Committee meeting. Please note the meeting is being transmitted live via video stream. The public can find the link to the stream by visiting the Orange County website and clicking on the tab for the legislature and locating the meeting on the calendar. Please silence your cell phones, tablets, and other electronic devices. And please be mindful that the microphones here in the statutory committee room are very sensitive. At this time, if you can please rise and join in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, Kelly, can we have a roll call?
Emo, Benelli,
here,
Cheney,
Here.
Sellers, Hotel, Dewey,
Here.
3 present, 3 absent.
Okay, first up on the item, we have Rick Golden, Orange County Attorney, Joseph Mahoney, Senior Assistant County Attorney, Eric Domingue, Commissioner, Department of Public Works, Bob Gray, Deputy Commissioner, EF&S, Anthony Griffin, Principal Sanitary Engineer, Department of Public Works, EF&S, and Mary Beth Bianconi, Pardon, Delaware. You guys can all join us up here.
You know they outnumber us now.
I know. A little thin today. Quite a team.
Yes, sir. Next year's wrestling.
there's one down by Mary too. Size of the change.
Okay. Before we get started, gentlemen in the back, if you just tell us your name and where you're from.
John Bell, Village of Chester.
Brian Boone, Village Chester.
Okay, great. First up, we have the review of the facility plan, and we're working on finishing up soon, including the Harriman improvements and the regional approaches. Mary Beth, you can just bring us up to date on that?
Sure, so, y'all will remember, and I didn't bring my my giant book that is the draft facility plan. Where we were at with that was we had provided the draft to, the staff for review, and we were working on how to get through that review process. The staff has provided us with extensive comments that we are currently in the process of reviewing. And we're going to be consolidating those, making changes, getting back to everyone here for their review so that we can work towards finalizing that facility plan. So that's really where we are with the facility plan.
Okay, and then what kind of timeline do we have on that?
So we're gonna have that done in November for staff review. So, you know, in the early part of November, we're already working on it. I was away for about a week this month, and then Brock managed to be away for the 2 weeks after I was away. So we lost 3 weeks of time, unfortunately, due to some vacations, but we had staff reviewing a lot of the data and doing a lot of the work while we were away. So it's just a matter of getting that together, so.
Good. And then after November, we'll be looking to bring it to the committee and then to the Fiscal Services Committee.
I believe that's our process, right? Because there's recommendations in that report. At least the report will make recommendations about what of the many options we evaluated from an engineering perspective, we recommend that the county consider. So that's what will be in the report.
Okay. Rick, I know you have another meeting come up. Do you have anything that you'd like to add or any?
No, thank you. Yeah, just about 20 minutes I'll have to.
Okay.
Thank you, though.
Sure. So really, that's what we're waiting on that.
So there's that and then the variance.
The
And I
variance?
do have an update on that.
Okay,
So, so the variance, folks will recall, that part of the variance, let me grab two of those. Back to those guys. Part of the variance, notice of incomplete application was that we need to conduct sampling of the contributions to the water treatment, to the wastewater treatment plant that we believed were creating the problem with total dissolved solid and chloride. Recall that our purpose, our justification for asking for the variance was that the background condition of the drinking water in the contributory to the wastewater treatment plant is actually the primary contributor of the total dissolved solids and chloride. So that was our supposition. We made that supposition based on documentary evidence that we had out there in the world. A lot of people have done studies, there's USGS geology information, all kinds of things. The DEC came back to us and said, you need to prove that that's true. So the case of proving that that's the case, that that's true, was to go sample raw water. So as we all remember that most of the drinking water in our service area comes from wells. So we have a few surface water treatment systems, but most of it comes from wells. So was to go surface the water, go sample the water as it comes out of the ground, sample the water after it is treated, because the treatment of drinking water uses chemicals to do good things like deactivate viruses and bacteria and make it all safe and healthy for us. But that actually adds chloride to the water. And then that drinking water obviously passes through homes and businesses where people use it to take showers and, you know, run dishwashers and do all kinds of things. It eventually ends up in our wastewater collection system and at our wastewater treatment plant. We bring it into our wastewater treatment plant. It is going to have some amount of total dissolved solids in it. We then treat it, and we again use processes that actually contribute total dissolved solids, again, to do good things, right? Create a clean water to be discharged into the environment. And then that water comes out the other side and into the Roundco. So you all remember we had a lot of discussion here about the quality assurance project plan, the sampling plan. So in accordance with the sampling plan, all of the sampling of all of those different steps of the water along the way, from where it comes out of the ground treatment into the collection system at the head of the treatment plant and back in the river. That's all been conducted. It was mostly conducted in August and September. There was one, I think, lingering data point that was in early October. We have virtually all of that data back from the lab at this point, and we're busy taking that data and making sense of it and making it useful information in response to, in accordance with the quality assurance project plan. But basically, all of this is to say what you have in front of you is a summary of the data analysis to date. Lots of facts and figures here, but essentially what this does is it proves our hypothesis. We were able to show that the raw water coming out of the ground contains total dissolved solids and chlorides that are at or approaching, and in some cases over, the regulatory standard that we're supposed to be discharging out of the wastewater treatment plant.
So before it even comes in.
Before we even get it,
We're off the chart with it.
we're already there, right? Right, and that was an important aspect of providing DEC with a justification as to why a variance from the water quality standard for total dissolved solids and chloride is appropriate in this case. So where do we go from here with this? We have a bit more work to do on the data. Then the fancy term is a sampling results and data usability report, which will be part of the response to the DEC's list of things we need to give them to complete the variance application. That is in process right now. That report's being worked on right now. So this is a summary. That report will be more detailed. And then our next steps after that, we've already started working on one of these steps. The notice of information that's still requested for the variance included that we go to the Orange County Department of Health and the Rockland County Department of Health and get an assessment of the human health impacts, potential human health impacts of this level of total dissolved solids and chloride in the environment. So the Burgess has graciously agreed to work with us on Orange County's response to that. And that is our kind of our starting point in terms of checking that box for the variance. And then we will then be reaching out to and working with Orange County or with Rockland County Department of Health along a parallel track. With that information in hand, so the final sampling report and the documentation from the two county health departments, we'll have responded to everything that was requested in DEC's notice to us for a final variance submission.
So their standard that they have now in place. So what's coming in is already at that. We're very close to that or.
Yeah, so if you go, there's a little colored table on the very back. This is really, Tracy would kill me because I'm going to be very unscientific. She's not listening. So do you see where, so it starts out, it says sample, and there's that kind of gray box at the top, and there's a blue box, a light green box, a dark green box. The boxes are indicating different kinds of waters that we sampled. So that top gray is all of the raw water, meaning water coming right out of the ground before it gets treated. And one of the things that you see, our regulatory standard for total dissolved solids is 500 milligrams per liter. And you can see that in our first well we sampled, it was 455. It was really close to the standard before when it came out of the ground. Some of these are lower, but you see a bunch that are hovering in the 300s. You see one that's over 500. You see two that's over 500. The next, that darker blue, that's after the water has been treated to be safe to drink. And so you can see that the water treatment process in most cases actually in some cases it decreased total dissolved solids, in some cases it added to them. Depends on the circumstances and the method of treatment that's used. The next one is sewage. The green is sewage. So that's pump station manhole sampling. You can see that all of those numbers are well in excess of 500. They're well in excess of the regulatory standard. So that's basically the water has now been used by the consumers. The consumer process has added more total, right? It has added more total dissolved, which is exactly what we expected. And then you see the Ramapo River influent to the treatment plant and effluent from the treatment plant and the Ramapo River down there. In some cases, the Rampo is above the regulatory standard. So, and this is a summary of lots of data. And that's why Tracy would kill me because it's not, it's a summary, right? It's not, but essentially that's what it's showing us. Is that as we suspected, the geology of the region is hard water. The hardness in water is in some ways indicative of total dissolved solids. So it is not surprising that when we evaluate the water, that there's a lot of total dissolved solids in that water because the water is very hard around here. That's why everyone has a water softener. It's also not surprising that the use of the water through people's homes and businesses adds total dissolved solids to it. Because we would expect that. So if you take some time to read the summary, one of the things you'll see is that in the data analysis, what we expect to happen in the use of water is happening. So it starts at this, we would expect domestic use to add a certain amount of total dissolved solids and chloride, and that's what we see in the data, and that's resulting in the influence to the treatment plant at Harriman being in some cases at or close to or above the regulatory standard. And then we treat the water, which is a good thing. We want to treat the water. We need that water before it's discharged into the Ramapo to be clean and safe, not having bacteria and viruses and things in it, those kinds of things. But that treatment process in and of itself adds total dissolved solids and chloride, again, as we would expect it to.
When we get down to the Ramapo River, you got 530 for upstream, RR down 001, 610, and
Yeah.
then 002 is 350.
Yeah.
Now, can you explain what the upstream portion is, the 001 and the 002?
Sure, absolutely. So upstream, Ramapo River upstream is upstream of where the Harriman wastewater treatment plant discharges. So the Harriman wastewater treatment plant has two outfalls, outfall 01 and outfall 02, and that's what the 1s and 2s reference here. They're two pipes that go to the river. They're in two different locations. The first one, the 530, is actually before the Harriman treatment plant is discharging to the Ramapo. This data summary shows that the Ramapo is already above that 500 milligrams per liter total dissolved solids before the Harriman treatment plant discharges. After outfall 01, it gets raised a little bit to 610.
Where is that?
I don't know if I have a map. Anthony, do you have a?
The old one is right at the Harriman plant.
Okay,
Mary Harriman pond that is right
Yeah.
there. There's
Oh,
a dam.
yeah.
Right on the other side of the dam.
Yeah.
okay.
It's right there, right at the plant.
And 02
It's
is
about 2 miles downstream
downstream.
by the railroad station.
Yep.
So 2 miles downstream, one of the things you see is it's 350. So, we're not doing, there's a difference between, correlation and causality, right? But one of the things we can say is that 2 miles downstream, lots of other stuff is happening to the Ramapo, aside from what comes in from Harriman, right? There's, probably roadside swales that get in there. There may be other wastewater treatment plants. There's all kinds of things that are contributing to the water in the Ramapo in that span. And what we see is that there must be some degree of dilution because we go from 610 to 250, right? So again, there's more work to do here in terms of making sense of all of this and presenting it in a report. But really what we wanted to do is let you know that the sampling is completed. The data is as expected. It's one of these things where, scientifically you start out with a hypothesis. I think, this is what's going to happen when I do testing. You create a testing program to try to prove or disprove your hypothesis. Created a testing program, that's that quality assurance project plan, conducted the testing with a lot of coordination and help from staff at the Orange County Sewer District, the county's contract operators, and then all of the communities that participated as well. In terms of coordination, lots of very good work done, and the results do uphold the theory, which was that this is in the variance is basically saying you're telling us we need to choose something at the end of pipe, which actually exists in nature, right? It's out there. So even if we treat it at the end of pipe, we're not actually addressing what's going on where the water is coming from.
Doesn't the DEC have numbers or metrics of where that water should be, or what number they have that's coming in.
So
It's already above their recommended number, and they must have a number of what should be considered standard drinking water or clean drinking water.
Right, so that's exactly what this is. So the total dissolved solids and the chloride limits there's a lot of words here, but basically that 500 standard and then it's 250 for chloride. And chloride, remember, is a piece of total dissolved solids. So whenever you see this data together, when you see a number for chloride, it's what chunk of total dissolved solids was chloride. And then if you can't sleep and you want to read Tracy's report here, you'll see that she also did constituents, so calcium, iron, potassium, manganese, magnesium, sodium, nitrate, sulfate, alkalinity, and hardness. So all of those things added together will add up to that total dissolved solids that you see. So this data has adopted a water quality standard for total dissolved solids of 500 and for chloride of 250. That's what's in our new species permit, the one we got in 2020, says we're supposed to meet these standards. We applied for a variance because what we're trying to say is that if the purpose of those 500 and 250 is to be protective of human health and the environment's already past that. So treating it at the end of the Harriman wastewater treatment plant is not going to substantially improve the circumstances out there in the world. It's not gonna help achieve the regulatory goal of having a 500 and 250 in the first place. Not to say that it shouldn't be addressed. It's just an end of pipe solution at Harriman isn't going to address this larger issue of hard water in the area, urbanization, which contributes to the discharge of chlorides, those kinds of things. It needs, as we've been saying for a long time now, a more regional, comprehensive approach.
Okay, so legislative.
Yeah, if I could.
Sure.
So this testing was done, you said in August, in September,
I believe the dates are actually, yeah.
September.
Data was collected in September.
Let's see, sampling began on August 23rd and completed September 22nd with one well sampled on October 4th. That's on the top page.
So from a contributing standpoint, the treatment plant relative to the Ramapo itself in terms of flow, what was going on at this particular time relative to that? Because it skews it potentially even more if we're in a period of time when the Ramapo is low flow and we're contributing a greater proportion.
Right, so a couple notes on that. So we did sample at what we would consider to be the worst case timeframe, right? When summertime, when we have the least amount of recharge in the watershed is going to give you sort of the worst case scenario, and that's okay. We wanna, because what we don't want someone to do is come back and say, well, you took your data in the most favorable condition, right? So that actually ends up working out well. There's a couple things about the Ramapo and the treatment plant's contribution to that. So, and I don't have this in front of me, but I can certainly get this. Do you recall a long time ago, you guys were required to put in a stream gauge monitor? You were required to contract with, I can't remember which federal government agency it was to actually put in a stream, USGS, a stream gauge monitor. That was the purpose of doing that, was to be able to evaluate what proportion of flow is all these contributors. So Tracy has all of that data. That would be part of this and part of the variance and part of the EIS. That all said, the way DEC regulates the Harriman wastewater treatment plant is that the Harriman wastewater treatment plant is the base flow of the Ramapo. So regardless of how much water is actually in the Ramapo, in fact, on any given day, the way that the species permit that we have that was issued in 2020 is written is that the water classification of the Ramapo in terms of its highest and best use, in terms of supporting aquatic life, in terms of human health, is relying 100% on the discharge from the Harriman wastewater treatment plant without respect to dilution. So to some degree, it ends up being an academic discussion in terms of how much flow there was on any given day when a sample was taken, because if the regulatory scheme is gonna say, we're gonna discount that anyway, doesn't matter. We need you to meet these standards absent any dilution or contribution of any other flows. That ends up being a bit of an academic discussion. And just so everybody knows, this permit that we have that has no dilution factor is not at all uncommon. No dilution factor comes into play when your discharge is at the very headwaters of a water body, which in effect this is the case here. There's not a lot of watershed for the Ramapo, kind of upstream of the discharge of the Harriman wastewater treatment plant. It's also not at all uncommon when you have ephemeral streams, so those are the ones that run seasonally and go dry in the winter, summertime, or intermittent streams, similar kind of circumstance. So these types of permits are not uncommon. It does add an enormous burden, a treatment burden, because you are creating the water essentially that has to meet the water classification for that water body. And that's kind of what got us here in the first place.
But this would prove that the impact for TDS and chlorides from the plant is not necessarily governing what's in the Ramapo.
Exactly. Because remember, let's think about this way too. So if we think about a river, and this is another area where Tracy would kill me, but this is a very simple explanation of how a river works, right? Or a stream or a creek. So you have this river, stream, or creek. Water in that river is going to come essentially from three places. One is, it rains, right? And presumably water manages to get there because it flows downhill by gravity. So that could be through culvert pipes, it could be runoff, just straight out runoff. It's going to get there one way or another, right? Another way water gets into a water body, like a river, is that the groundwater table intersects the bottom of that water body in some cases. And that's why you have these streams when you see them in the summertime where for 6 months of the year, it's got water in it. And then in the summertime, it has no water in it. Well, where'd the water go? Well, that's because the water table is actually lower than the bottom of the stream. And when you recharge, that water table rises and it now intersects the bottom of the stream, right? And then the third place water comes from, right, is from like a wastewater treatment plant, like some kind of a direct discharge that's intentionally putting water into that water body. So in the case of the Ramapo, it's considered, it's being treated like an intermittent stream. I'm not sure if in fact it is intermittent. To me, there's water in it all the time. But part of the reason for this logic of this permit is because the treatment plant is at the headwaters of a very shallow and small watershed for the Ramapo, highly urbanized, and it's such a large volume overall. So it's not an hydro in the ocean.
Going back to the comment you made, just for reference purposes, relative to having the health departments for Rockland and Orange County, what are they weighing in on the health effects of the people who are using the water that's coming out of the ground, or the health effects of anybody who would come in contact with the discharge and the Ramapo River?
Oh, yeah. So, okay. So it's not, so the presence of total dissolved solids and chloride is not a contact issue. If it's on your skin, it's hurt you, those kinds of things. And I don't know that I have the language right here and I never brought it. I could read you exactly what they asked for, but it was essentially, since the underlying regulatory purpose of having a chloride limit at all had to do with the potential human health effect. And I think we talked about this. What it was a long time ago, there was a concern that people can begin to taste salinity at around 250 milligrams per liter of chloride. And that if you exceeded that, people would not be as inclined to drink water, so they may be chronically dehydrated, which leads to a whole host of health issues. This was a sort of very interesting, goes way back. It's like the 60s, right? I think that there is maybe some different thought in public health these days in that regard, particularly in the fact that everybody walks around with their own personal hydration system, i.e. plastic water bottle, right? And that it's sort of a different perspective. But nevertheless, we have this standard to meet. So DEC is not in the business of saying what's healthy for you or not healthy for you. They're not doctors. It's not their job. So what they asked was essentially at the levels of total dissolved solids and the component of chloride that we're seeing in this data, Department of Health, it's your job to protect public health.
All the data or just the discharge?
Well, so what they asked us for was we are to give them our data. They are, as public health officials, to look at our data and say, does this have some kind of direct negative impact on human health? That's what they asked them for. It's a challenge.
But we don't have control
Nope.
over
And-
the, what's coming out of the ground. All we have control over is what we're discharging.
And that's exactly the point, right? So people are not directly putting straws in the round hole river and drinking the water, right? It's an indirect thing. And again, back to the point we made earlier, if the water coming out of the ground does not meet these standards already, then the public health issue is on that side of the fence, right? So that's actually, I think, the purpose of this discussion is to say if the underpinning of the regulation is public health, and the public health is going to be substantially impacted by the drinking water, then the question to the public health officials is, what do you feel, what is your professional assessment of this level of chloride in the environment? And the environment does equal the water that's being drawn out for drinking water, right? Now, it's going to be I will be honest, I think it's going to be a very difficult question for these folks to answer. Because I think Tracy did an enormous amount of research, you guys may remember, on, what are the underpinnings of having a chloride limit. It's not like table salt where they say, okay, if you have high blood pressure, don't have table salt. These are not the same thing. So I think that this is going to be a challenge. I see why DEC asked for it. I understand why they did. It's not their job to say what this is. But in the statute for the variance, one of the questions is, would granting the variance cause negative impacts to human health or the environment? So they're trying to get at that question.
And there are no, are there any, you talk, we're 2 miles downstream, I guess, with the one outfall. Are there any other, there are no other treatment plant outfalls or significant
I don't
outfalls that
believe-
exist within
Not
that?
between,
Not between us and O2.
but after that there are.
I think there's.
Before us there are, and after
The
that.
parasite has just a small permit, but it's relatively, anything, it's just stormwater.
We can actually, one of the things that I think, I know I saw this map, so it's in something, is a map of all of the permitted wastewater discharges in the roundabout. So we have them all, what they are, what's the volume permitted discharge, who's the source, all that stuff. Because you really, as we've been saying all along, to look at the roundabout, not, myopically, oh, here's some point where some pipe discharges, but, here's the Ramapo River basin. And, what are the contributors of potential sources of contamination? It's a shallow, highly urbanized watershed.
Thank you, Jim.
So Mary Beth, when, how soon do you think this will be sent, to DEC?
So the data sampling and usability report will be done, I believe, next week. It's going to be finished. We've already reached out to Orange County Department of Health. We're working with them already. The idea will be to work with Rockland as soon as possible. And so the goal is to have this completed by the end of November
Okay,
so that we can respond to the DEC.
okay.
But that's the goal. Obviously, things have to go to staff for review and things like that, but that's the goal. This is a little more straightforward because it's data.
Yeah,
It's,
and then, having in the past, have you dealt with something like this before with the DEC? And any way to anticipate the
So-
timeline on their response back?
So as we've said before, the only other variance that exists like this in the state is the one that was established for Mercury. So we've been looking to that process for how they handled this. A lot of folks here at the table will know we've had extensive conversations with DEC regarding this process and variance and sequencing events and those kinds of things. Know that DEC is anticipating receiving this.
Yeah.
And that they have staff who will look, it's not gonna sit on someone's desk. They're gonna look at it. I think it's a new, it's kind of a new process for them. So there will be no doubt some time, but
Well, I feel like we're certainly continually,
Yeah.
as we always have been, moving along, but we are getting to a point now where
Yeah.
it's hopefully some decisions will be forthcoming from the DEC, certainly by the beginning of next year, first
that's
quarter, hopefully.
the idea.
That's it. Yes, sir.
There we go. Our treatment at the end, are we chlorinating and dechlorinating, or do we?
Coordinate, decoordinate.
Okay, so Mary Beth, what impact will it have going to UV and getting rid of the chlorine?
That will have a positive impact, and I know Brock has been looking at what that would result in. But
Because
that would have.
I mean, the state has been pushing everybody to go to UV and get rid of the chlorine.
There will still be,
That will help.
yes, it will. There will still be, just because in the treatment process, chlorine is used to keep equipment clean, to, those kinds of things. So you're not gonna eliminate chlorine entirely, but to not use it as your final step in treatment for disinfection will make a difference. Absolutely.
Okay, thanks, Mary Beth. So that's the review of the update on the sampling, and last on our agenda, item 1C is a sewer meters update.
That was with me when we last spoke.
That was what?
The contract was with me when we last spoke,
Okay,
and there was an issue that came up that I needed to just evaluate and redraft some issues. I spoke with EF&S. They made the modifications very quickly on what they needed to do. I had to do research and make modifications. It's been returned to EF&S. They responded in an hour, sending comments, and it's back to DGS.
okay, so the next step on that would be, I know that DPW workers are gonna be doing the install.
Yep.
And how is the procurement of the meters? Is that moving, and now you can move along for that?
Yeah,
or
that's over.
Being bid on.
DPS right
Being bid on the bids? Did they
That's-
go out?
That's what DGS will do.
Okay, all right.
Moving forward.
I have a question, and that actually came up in budget hearing. In regard to, now we're going back a long time, as far as the assortment of residents that have been paying into the sewer plant, but not having the ability to hook up. That was a discussion we haven't had in a long time. Have we abated that issue, or is that still something that's out? And if it is what we're proposing going to solve that issue once and for all? And I know that probably the two of you and myself are the only ones around now.
I mean, there's properties that do not have sewer lines reached to them to be able to serve. And part of the facility plan was not to address those.
But are they still paying into something?
They pay the sewer tax, they don't pay the O&M.
Okay,
Yeah, they pay on sewer tax.
so my question is.
Yeah.
And none of this is going to be, in an effort to do that, do they have to make some type of an initiative on their own to get hooked up?
Typically, the way that the district has reached those properties is by developers expanding the system.
Exactly.
And that's the way it's been. The interceptors, the county put in, and the county also put in collection lines back at the beginning, the creation of the sewer district. But that was it. And then anything beyond that, other than Skyview, because I guess they were promised years ago to have their sewer lines put in by the county had the right to do that. It's just a matter of, developers needing to reach their property, they then would extend the system and grab additional properties along the way. And we
So it's
always
on,
make sure
it's on the shoulders of the developers.
the demand for development,
What about the homes that are not part of a development, near a development that don't have it, don't have the infrastructure, the sewer? There's some parts of that also.
Yeah, that's what I mean, those areas, they're sitting in islands or.
Then it's the property owner.
Yeah.
It would come down to
For extending the
the
main-
infrastructure in.
That's the way it's been.
How many of those are we talking about? Do you have any idea?
There's not a lot. I mean, most of it's just like fringe properties, probably
Just like
Town of
a
Monroe.
handful.
Nothing in the village of Curious Joel, nothing in the village of Harriman, nothing in the village of Monroe. So it'd be Town of Monroe, Town of Monroe areas.
So they moved into those homes knowing that there was a tax for
Yeah,
the sewer.
yeah, that going
And
back
the
to,
responsibility is really on them to
Since the
get
late
themselves
70s.
hooked up.
Say 50 years.
yeah.
Or a developer who is beyond that.
Yeah, them,
And
yeah.
then,
And-
yes.
and then
Then they
just-
benefit, yeah.
Okay.
Would
Next.
we,
That's not an uncommon situation. It
They have
may
septic
seem a little,
They have their septic system.
because when you create a district, right, you're sort of picking a geography on a map. And not all of the pipes go to everything in the geography, but the way the regulation says is that everybody is benefited by the creation of that district and the eventual access, right? So that's not.
The way that the legislatures positioned it years ago, I had at least read, was when that same question came up. Was wait a minute, I don't understand why I'm having to pay. It's, well, you're benefiting from being within a district as a whole. Living
You
in a-
moved to the
living-
backside.
living in a cleaner environment for this kind of
Yeah.
development, this kind of, area to have what it has.
And you do have access. You spend the money to put the pipe in. It's not like you're an outside user, it needs an agreement and all
Well,
kinds of other
it's
stuff.
not like you have to take it all the way to the plant. You-
Right, right.
That's there, a
Right.
lot of the infrastructure.
So in some cases, it may be, it's not just the lateral, obviously.
be a main.
So it has to go,
Absolutely.
the main may be a mile and a half, 2 miles away.
Yeah.
It could be.
Can we compel a developer to hook up or allow to have hookups along the route of the pipe that they would
Always,
install?
what we do is we have them put laterals to the property lines. And then it's up to the property owner to actually make the connection.
But even if it's not part of their development,
Yeah, I mean, along the way, anything along the way of the main to get to their
Yeah.
property. And we would position it, so that, it's grabbing as much as it possibly can with laterals coming off of the main right to the property line.
and the developer would be required to do that.
Yeah, they have no connection whatsoever. of doing
They're,
it.
they're not gonna extend the main in a different direction that they would have otherwise.
No, I
Right.
realize that. It's just a, of the question of whether we can compel them to create laterals to the property line
Yes,
or properties that aren't part of their development, but along the route of the pipe.
never a problem,
Right, that,
never ever a problem.
It's
But I say these
standard operating
handful of
procedure.
properties are just something that got held up because it never was.
They're on the fringes.
Yeah, exactly.
They're on the
So I
fringes.
think new stuff moving forward, we don't see.
And you'll hear from some of those property owners, they don't want a sewer main. They like it just the way that it is. But, well, because they're afraid that if a sewer main is brought up, some of those large tracts of land would be valuable to
development,
exactly.
develop as well.
Exactly.
So they kind of like. the way
So
it
it's not
is.
an issue.
Eventually, it will happen. It's just a matter of time.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other comments or questions?
I know, you've gone over this before or whatever, but just in rational time, what do you anticipate complete built up of Harriman treatment plant where we can get more capacity and such? Timeline wise, 1 year, 2 years, 5 years? Any
It's a number of years.
logical?
Yeah, it's a number of years really, and just realistically, the design and permitting process will take quite a bit of time. This is a very a large project that involves not only the treatment plant, but also the lower interceptor, the improvements to the lower interceptor, which is a pretty big undertaking. So the design process will take quite a bit of time. There's a regulatory review process. It'll take quite a bit of time, and then constructions, you know, it's a big projects. So you're probably in the 4 or 5 year timeline, something like that is realistic.
Okay.
You know, design is 18 months to 2 years, design and regulatory approvals, you know, bidding, construction is a couple of years. It's just reasonable, you know, and then there's always the space in between where, you know, this body has been very good about acting and moving forward. It's that there's others who come into play, you know, in terms of the state and in terms of, you know, the processes that have to be reviewed and approved. So.
And is there any other update on just one last thing about the paired waters and where we've gone with that since that was classified?
So we submitted our comments on the draft 303D list.
I think it
It closed,
January this year.
it closes, yeah, I think the comment period closes in January. It's a long
We submitted our comments a number of months ago.
number of months ago. So the comment period is really very long with these. I'll double check to see when it closes. Then after the comment period closes,
Okay.
then DEC scout all the comments, they make any changes, any amendments. They then, I'm pretty sure that with 303D lists, they have to coordinate with EPA before they finalize. So then it goes to the feds,
That's
EPA, yeah, so
It's actually just a proposed listing.
Yeah, my
It's the
understanding,
you get it mixed.
yeah, my understanding is that it's supposed to go to the DEC is supposed to close the public commenting period like in April of this year. And then it has to go to the DEC and the DEC is supposed to act on it in September. But they've been like 6 months to a year behind. The EPA has.
I think you're being generous.
yeah, I think so.
Probably.
So, because when we say 303D, what we're referring to is that is section 303D of the Clean Water Act, Federal Clean Water Act. Yeah, it just turned 50, so 1972, it just turned 50 like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
It's the same age as my little brother. So there you go. It's easy to remember. You know, that will amble its way along. It's not a fast process. But I think we've done, you know, our advocacy.
And you got
We've
your
done-
comments in already?
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
They
yeah.
went in long,
Wow, we
months
did
ago.
not, we did not.
Did you forward those to the committee members?
Michelle.
Comments? Okay. That's it. Anything else? Jim? Seeing any, thank you, everybody, for
Do you
coming
want to
and
schedule next
we'll
meeting?
get a next meeting here. Kelly, do you have, when we go back to our normal third Wednesday?
We can do that, 1:30?
Yep, 1:30,
That would be the day rules on November 16th, it's a Wednesday.
November 16th at 1:30 again. Okay, is that good for everybody?
November 16th, 1:30, right?
That should be a Wednesday.
It's a Wednesday.
Yes, it is.
Third Wednesday of November. Eric, you good?
I'm good. There's 1:30 now on the clock.
Yeah, back to
I'll
1:30.
just put it in my calendar. So.
Okay. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you for your time.
And,
Appreciate it.
Thanks a lot. Like a motion.
So
move.
I got this.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thank you for coming.
Okay, thanks, everybody.
Thank you.